Well, the interesting thing is we're not trying to do this in a particularly arbitrary way. We've actually put a story group together that has very carefully looked at the narrative of all sorts of things we're doing, whether or not it's a saga film, it's one of the standalone films, it's a game, even the narrative that exists inside the publishing that we do. We talk about all of it as a kind of connective piece so that we have a very, very clear idea of what these stories are, and not to set them up as sequels, but to have them inform those other stories, either in terms of a sense of place, the politics, where it falls within the mythological structure that George created. Those are all things that we take seriously, and we think the fans do too. They want to feel as though there's a thoughtful process in connecting these stories. So that is something that we're working very, very hard with. So Rogue One is really the story of a group of rebel fighters who go in to the most impenetrable landscape of the Death Star to steal the Death Star plans. And it's a harrowing journey and an amazing action adventure story of what's involved in trying to get those plans. I think in large part, he not only loved the story and was a huge Star Wars fan, but he immediately saw the opportunity to stylistically approach the story in a way that you haven't really seen with Star Wars movies. And that's part of what we're also looking for, are directors and different talent that grew up on Star Wars and can come into the fold and offer opportunities to explore very different ways to tell these stories and yet still have them be Star Wars movies. She's sort of distanced herself from people. She's a survivor. She's not particularly happy. She's clearly been fighting her way through things, struggling, and she's getting in a lot of trouble. And so when we first meet her, she really defines a kind of rebel character. But the interesting thing is the other characters we meet along the way that she comes in contact with, they all have their own stories. They're all disconnected a little bit in some way. And that's what's interesting in watching how this band of rebels actually begins to come together and unite in solidarity around something extremely important that they need to accomplish. There's also a lot of humor in the fact that K2SO is a reprogrammed Empire droid, and the fact that all the rebels that interact with him are a little nervous about the fact that this is an enemy droid, and they're just being told by somebody they don't even know that well, Cassian, that, oh, don't worry, he's fine, nothing to worry about. Yeah, he used to work for the enemy, but he doesn't anymore. So you can imagine as all these different disparate soldiers begin to come together and they feel they need to trust and rely on K2SO, they're all, questioning that a little bit. But it turns out that he is a great rebel droid. Chirrut is essentially like a monk. He's somebody who has deep respect for the Force. He cares about it very much. He recognizes it's sort of gone with the Jedi, but it's still very, very important to him. And Baze is somebody he's known since they were kids. And Baze is a trained assassin. They couldn't be more opposite. But they actually really deeply care about one another, and they've made this commitment to each other that they're going to take care of the pilgrims, the people who still exist on the planet of Jeddah, who still believe in what the Jedi were all about. And they want to protect the planet so that the pilgrims can continue to pray. And Jeddah is essentially the Jedi holy city. And these are two self-appointed guardians of that city. So they're a very interesting dichotomy, interesting dynamic together. And they also provide some kind of fun humor as well. There's no question that the people who come and work with us on Star Wars have a real understanding and they care about it greatly and they want to share it with their families. That's part of the power of Star Wars, is that ability to take something that meant so much to you as you were growing up, and it's still around. It's still something being explored, new stories are being told, and the idea that you can share that with members of your family, share that with your friends, it really brings back that great feeling of being able to go into the cinema and watch a movie where there's such a cross section of people who all are really just having a fantastic good time. And that's, I think, what Star Wars represents, is that feeling. And that's what parents and kids and everybody want to share all over the world. You know, the more we look into creating these fantastic female stars inside of Star Wars, which really carry on from a tradition that George Lucas created when he put the feisty Princess Leia in New Hope, and then that carried on for 3 movies. I think she's a real touchstone, certainly was then and continues to be, with the casting of Daisy Ridley as Rey in episode 7, Force Awakens. And now Felicity coming into Rogue One is just fantastic. She's such a brilliant actress, and she brings a sense of gravitas and importance to anything that she does. And yet she, there's a real whimsy to her too. She has a great smile, a wonderful sense of humor, and she's been fantastic,